Alright, we're ready to start the reassembly of our AS1187 movement from the Crawford watch. I've got the mainspring barrel sitting here empty because we need to put a new mainspring in it. That's the first thing we're going to do. If you remember from the old video, when we disassembled it, the old mainspring was in pretty bad condition. It was set into a deep spiral and wouldn't produce any power for the watch, so we've got a brand new one here for it. And the new one comes in a metal washer that keeps it compressed to a state slightly smaller than the opening of the mainspring barrel, so that we can just push it in with our fingers out of this washer without having to use a mainspring winder, which is very convenient. When you do this, you need to make sure the spring is oriented the correct direction, as this one is here. If we put it in upside down, it would the watch wouldn't wind because the spring would try to wind in the wrong direction. So what we do is we lay the new mainspring over the barrel so that it's lined up with it, and then we just push it in with our fingers. And I'm going to have to help that a little bit with using a screwdriver to kind of push down some of the coils, because the stuff near the edge is not pushing in as far as the stuff in the middle. Alright, I've got it in. Now the next thing we need to do is install the mainspring barrel arbor, and we're going to do that using a pen vise. I put the arbor into a pen vise, and if you look at the arbor, there's two sides of it. One end of it has a blunt end, and the other end has screw threads in the end, as you can see in this one. The one with the screw threads needs to be the one that's on the outside of the pen vise, because this is the one we're going to insert into the barrel. The way that we're going to do this is we need to insert this into the barrel so that the arbor goes inside the coil in the middle there. And it takes a little bit of finagling around to get it to go in, because the spring is coiled a little bit smaller than the size of the arbor to make it stick onto the arbor and catch the hook in there. Alright, I've got it in, and that went in faster than I thought it was going to. You can see kind of how it works here. You'll notice that the end of the arbor with the screw thread sticks out through the bottom of the barrel. This is actually going to be the top of the barrel when we put it into the movement, because the ratchet wheel attaches to the top of this. But we're going to put the lid on the other side. And in order to do that, we first need to get the pen vise off of it, because we want to leave the arbor in the barrel and free it from the pen vise. So what I'm going to do is simply loosen the pen vise while it's still stuck in there, and lift it right out. And we can see that the arbor is in there now, and the mainspring is in there with it. Now we need to put the lid on the mainspring barrel, and I've got this device here that has a hole for the arbor to stick through that we set the barrel on. Now here's our lid. If you look at the lid, one side of the lid has a ridge around the hole in the middle and a little ridge around the edge as well. The other side is completely flat. The flat side is what goes up. So we need to lay this over the barrel with the arbor sticking through the hole, just like that. And then we'll just push down on it with our fingers, making sure that the bottom of the arbor goes through that hole in our little table we're using here. Oh, it's not on the latch. Why not? Oh, there it goes. I just heard it snap. I was pushing it with my fingers now to latch it down. Oh, it's still up a little higher on one side than the other. Gotta make sure it is even all the way around. Usually I push it down while it's laying on the barrel closer device here, but I was having trouble pushing it all the way down, so I picked it up and did it with my hands. Okay, it looks good now. So there's our closed barrel. Now the barrel goes into the movement. In this hole right here is for the barrel. And we put it in with the lid side facing down, so that the part of the arbor that has the screw threads in it faces up. The next things we need to install are the center wheel and the center wheel bridge, which holds the center wheel from the top. The center wheel goes through this hole right here next to the mainspring barrel. So I've got the center wheel installed. Before I put the center wheel bridge in place, I'm going to put a little drop of Mobius HP 1300 oil on the little jewel that's visible down here. That's for the third wheel. And I'm going to put some Mobius 9010 on this jewel, which is for the escape wheel, which we're going to put in later. And it's hard to reach that to oil it once we put the bridge and such in place, so I'm going to oil it now. I put on the center wheel bridge and screwed down the two screws that hold it in place. The next thing we need to do is add the barrel bridge, but before we add the barrel bridge, we have to drop in the retaining screw for the stem, and that goes into this hole right here. And the reason I'm dropping this in now is because the barrel bridge goes over the top of this. So if we put the barrel bridge on first, we won't be able to put this in. This doesn't actually thread into the base plate of the movement. It just sticks into a bare hole. The screw threads on the end of it will screw into the detent lever when we install it. So this holds the detent lever on, which is on the other side of the movement, as well as holding the stem in place. But it has to be inserted before we put the mainspring barrel on. Next, we can lay the mainspring barrel on top of that then. I have a hard time lining this up when I'm trying to do it under the camera. I've tightened down the 3 screws that hold the barrel bridge in place, and now I need to add the ratchet wheel, which goes here over the mainspring barrel, and it goes over the arbor here. When you turn the stem on the watch, it turns the crown wheel, which turns the ratchet wheel, which is attached to the arbor, which turns the mainspring to wind it up. Here's the ratchet wheel. We need to make sure that it's lined up because the ratchet wheel has a square hole in it and the top of the arbor is square, so we have to get that lined up so that the ratchet wheel will drop onto that square arbor. I had to look at it under a magnifier off camera to get it lined up properly, but you can see that the square is sticking up through the middle of the square hole now. I've got that tightened down. You have to kind of hold the wheel with your fingers while you're tightening the screwdriver because otherwise the whole wheel will just turn when you turn the screwdriver. The next thing we're going to do is add the crown wheel, and that's the little wheel that goes in this compartment. There's a little washer you can see that I've put over the post that the crown wheel rides on. And that washer is an important part of it. So if you didn't put that on there, the crown wheel would slot back and forth in there. You have to get the crown wheel teeth aligned with the ratchet wheel. There we go. Now we can put the screw in. Now the screw with this one is a left-handed screw, just like we talked about when we disassembled the watch. Normally to tighten the screw, you would turn it clockwise to tighten it. This one we're going to turn counterclockwise to tighten it because as I said, it's a left-handed screw. If you tried turning it clockwise, it would never go in. I just took the ratchet wheel back off because I remember that I'd forgotten to put in the click spring, which is right here. It's that little cane-shaped spring. The short end of it goes into that little hole right there, and then the rest curves up through this cutout in the movement and goes back along here to where it would engage with the click when we put it on. The easiest way to put this in is to first set it up like this with the short end stuck into the hole, and then by putting one finger over it to hold it in place, you can use your tweezers to manipulate the long end back into the side of the groove where it needs to go. Alright, I've got the click spring in, and now you can see it, how it goes into that little cutout there. I'm going to go ahead and replace the ratchet wheel, and then after that it'll be time for us to add the third wheel and fourth wheel. I'm going to go ahead and add the cannon pinion on the dial side of the movement before I add the rest of the drivetrain. The cannon pinion goes over the center post right here. That's the bottom post from the center wheel. And the cannon pinion will carry the hour hand, and the center post of the center wheel will carry the minute hand. And then the second hand will be carried by an extended post sticking through this hollow tube from the fourth wheel, which we're going to put in on the other side. The cannon pinion just slides over the top of this post, and it's held on by friction. The way that I push it down there to snap it in place is just put the tweezers around the base of it there and push down. And there you just sort of snap it in place. And now you can see it now in its place on the movement. Now we'll go ahead and flip the movement back over and work on the back side of the movement some more. Next we're going to put in the third wheel, and the third wheel goes into this hole right here. There's a real long stem on that wheel that goes into a jewel in the base plate below this hole. And then after we put in the third wheel, we're going to put in the fourth wheel, which goes through the middle of the tube for the center wheel. And then we're going to put in the escape wheel, which goes down here. And then we can put the train bridge over the top of those. There's the third wheel. Now it looks like it's sitting too low. It's actually touching the top of the bridge there, which it shouldn't be. And the reason is because I haven't installed the cap jewel on the other side of the movement that holds up the bottom of the spindle. Once that's installed, this will be raised just slightly. The next thing we're going to put in then is the fourth wheel. And it goes through the tube in the center of the center wheel's post and goes all the way through the movement and comes out through the middle of that post on the dial side of the movement to carry the second hand. I've dropped in the fourth wheel, and I've also put in the escape wheel, and I probably should have put the escape wheel in before I put on the center wheel bridge, because it was kind of hard getting it way back in there, because it's way underneath here with just the post sticking up next to these other gears. It's got a very long post that sticks up with a pinion on the top of it that interacts with the fourth wheel. So the next thing we were ready to do is put on, actually I think I should put on the pallet fork and pallet bridge before I put on the train bridge, because I think they may be partially hidden under the train bridge if I do that. Alright, I got the pallet fork in there, and it goes into a jewel. It's right under here. And you need to make sure that the long arm coming off of it goes between the two banking pins there. And now we need to put the bridge on. And the pallet fork bridge is held on by one screw, but there's two posts that stick up from the bottom of the movement that it has to go onto to align it. Alright, the pallet bridge is installed, and you can see it there over the top of the pallet fork with the one jewel at the very end of it. And there's two pins there that hold it in place and an empty screw slot. I'm going to stick the screw in just a moment. Something else I'm going to do too is I'm going to stick a little tiny drop of Mobius 9010 oil on the top of that jewel to lubricate the top spindle of the pallet fork. After I finish that, we'll be ready to put on the train bridge. Here's our train bridge. I had to put a little tiny drop of Mobius 9010 in one of the jewels. This jewel right here, that's the upper jewel for the escape wheel, and I had to put oil there because this one has a cap jewel on the other side. If you look at the jewels on a watch up close, one side of the jewel will be flat and the other side will have a little cup-shaped indentation in it. That's called the oil cup. That's where you put the oil. So whichever side has the oil cup is where you lubricate it. If you lubricate it on the flat side, most of the oil won't get into the jewel and won't lubricate very well. This one has its oil cup on the bottom side of the train bridge, but these other ones here have their oil cups on the top of the train bridge. These other two here do. So now we're going to put that on the movement. And this is one of the hardest things there is to do with this, because trying to get all these gears lined up with the train bridge jewels is going to be a pain. We got the bridge on, and that actually went on a little easier than I thought it would. I basically held it above the movement in the tweezers and tried to line up the screw holes on both sides, and then just dropped it on there, and it kind of fell into place on all the spindles very easily. It doesn't always work that easily when you do this, but that's the best technique for doing it. I need to put in the three screws that hold it in place. There's one here, and one here. And then I need to install the cap jewel up here, and I need to install the lower cap jewel for the escape wheel. But I may wait to do that. I may wait to install the lower cap jewel until I put on the balance wheel, because there's a lower cap jewel for that and for the third wheel too that need to be installed on the bottom. But for right now, I'm going to go ahead and put these screws in and then put this cap jewel on here. And I'm going to put a little drop of Mobius 9010 on that cap jewel before I drop it into place. That way the cap jewel will have some lubrication on it too. I flipped the movement over, and on the bottom of the movement on the dial side, there are a couple of cap jewels we need to put on. One here and one here. One of those is for the third wheel, and I'm not sure why they put a cap jewel on the third wheel. That's not something that most watches have, but this one does. And there's also one for the escape wheel. So what we need to do with these is we need to put a little drop of Mobius 9010 on the flat side of the cap jewel, and then flip it over so that the oil side goes down, and drop it onto the movement so that the oil goes onto the jewel it's already set into the base plate. I've lubricated both of those cap jewels and put them both in place and put the little screws that hold them in on the movement. So the next thing we need to do is flip the movement over and install the balance cock and balance wheel. And then after that we can put in the balance jewels. I've installed the balance cock and the balance wheel, and you can see the upper part of the balance staff inside the hole where the jewel is going to go. And there's one like that on the bottom of the movement too that will also accept the Incabloc Jewels for the lower balance staff. It's a lot easier to install the balance when you don't have the Incabloc Jewels in place, because that way you don't try to get that tiny little staff into the jewels when you're trying to put the balance cock on. It's a lot easier to install it now where the staff goes through those bigger holes, and then drop the jewels in on them later, and that's what we're going to do. The top and bottom jewels for the balance staff are the Incabloc Jewels, which are a two-part jewel. There's a pass-through jewel, the lower jewel that the spindle of the balance staff goes through, and then there's a cap jewel that the end of the balance staff rides against. And there's one of these on the top on the balance cock, and there's one on the bottom of the base plate. Now here are the jewels. These are the lower jewels, and these are the cap jewels. And I've got the lower jewels turned upside down, and they're paired up because one set of them is slightly bigger than the other. The bigger ones go in the top in the balance cock, and the bottom, and the smaller ones go in the base plate. To prepare these to put on, I'm going to put a tiny drop of the Mobius 9010 oil inside each of the lower jewels, and then I'm going to put a little drop on the flat side of the cap jewel for each one. And then once I do that, I'm going to pick up the lower jewel and drop it on top of the cap jewel. And they should stick together, then I can pick it up and turn it over and drop it in to its place on the movement. There, I've got the lower jewel set in the bottom of the base plate. The cap jewel is on top there, and the Incabloc spring is open. I need to close that and latch it, and then we'll be all done with this one. And we can flip the movement over and put the jewels into the top too. That's the lower one in. Now it's time to do the top one. You can see I've got the spring closed and everything is ready to go. I got the jewels installed. The balance was working right and everything, so I went ahead and installed the click, and I wound up the mainspring to see if it would run, and it's running really strong and healthy. You can see the balance is spinning and everything. I did screw one thing up though. I broke half of the Incabloc spring on the balance cock. That's going to have to be replaced probably before I can actually wear the watch, because I don't know if it's possible for the jewel to slip out of there around the half of it that's still there. So I'm going to have to figure out how to do that. That's something I've never done before. I know the springs can be replaced, so I'm going to have to figure out what to do about that. But for right now, the thing is working. So I'm happy about this. As soon as I figure out how to fix that spring, then I can finish putting it together and actually wear this watch. I do need to finish putting together the keyless works and the motion works on the other side of the movement. And I'm not going to mess with that until I can figure out this Incabloc spring. So it may be another few days or a week or so before I post another video showing the completion of all this. Because it's going to take me some time to find the part and get it shipped to me, and then figure out how to install it. Let's go ahead and put it on the Timegrapher though and see what kind of results we're getting now compared to how it was when we first started out. So here's our Timegrapher readings. It's not too bad. The rate is correctable. The amplitude is lower than I would like though, at only 213 degrees. 210 it just changed to. Beat error is 1.5 milliseconds. That's not too awful. We can probably fix that. The rate's kind of fluctuating a bit though, and I suspect that a lot of this has to do with that broken spring on the Incabloc jewel on the balance cock. The jewel, you can see, is kind of wobbling a little bit back and forth as the balance wheel spins because that spring is broken. So I think that's contributing to the problems with the low amplitude and the rate that's varying. Might even have something to do with the beat error too. I'm not sure. I need to replace that spring before we go any further, but this is a big improvement over what we started out with though. After the service, after cleaning it and re-lubricating it, putting it back together, this is a huge improvement over what we had before. So I'm pretty happy with how this is turning out. I'm disappointed that I broke that Incabloc spring, which is going to be a pain to replace, but everything else looks like it's working out really well here. And one thing that was interesting was when I first put it on the Timegrapher, the readings were really awful. It was like negative 600 seconds per day, but the amplitude was extremely high, like 330 degrees, and that didn't seem right. Well, I demagnetized it because I hadn't done that yet, and that dropped the readings back to what we're seeing here, which are more normal. So I suspect that some of the hairspring coils are sticking together and causing the high amplitude and low rate readings that we were seeing. It looks like the rate's starting to kind of stabilize now. It's not showing as much fluctuation as before, but our amplitude does need to be higher, and I'd like to get the beat error and the rate corrected to something closer to perfect, and I think I can do that after I get that spring replaced.